And for a lot of us, I mean, we all get busy with life, and I understand that. But I think what's more important is that we all figure out what works for us. Like, there's nothing magic about writing every day. I kind of saw that that is something that would work for me. But I think for people with families or people with demanding jobs or, whatever your circumstances are in life, if you wrote 5 days a week or every other day or whatever really works for you, I think the important thing that we owe it to ourselves is this is something that we've said we want to do, and we owe it to ourselves to actually do it and create a way for us to do it, right? That it works for us in our lives. So I guess that's what resonated with me with that message was, okay, well, 25 words, I can write 25 words a day.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 289 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In an episode in late 2022, after receiving feedback from numerous listeners on how they were interested in hearing from less established authors, maybe those who are near the beginning of their writer journey, I promised that I'd be sure to bring in more writers like that. I put out a call and received a fair number of writers early on in their author journey. Now, I don't want to call them beginning writers because many of them have been writing for a long time. So beginning or new writers would be a bit of a misnomer. We could say, new to publishing, haven't yet been traditionally published, haven't yet self-published, but I kind of prefer to call them writers early on in their author journey because, as we know, it's a very long-term thing. And so even if, like today's guest, we've been writing for a long, long time, I'm still going to call it early on in the writing journey. But in any case, that's what you're going to hear in this episode. Today, you'll hear my chat with Malcolm Coon, someone who works in tech full-time as an entrepreneur. In Malcolm's words, I have been dabbling with writing for the past decade. My writing has been sporadic. I'll go a couple of months without writing and then write every day for a couple of months. That cycle repeats, usually depending on work projects and available time. Sound familiar, listener? Because I've done that. And I'm sure that many of you have also done that. But let's see what Malcolm plans to do about that. And we talk about this, Malcolm's love of his day job, which he doesn't plan on giving up should his writing income ever get to that sort of level, his goal of completing a short story every month this year, and more. And all that's coming up later in this episode. But first, let's hear a word about this episode's sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Findaway Voices. Now, Findaway Voices is a platform that allows you to get your audiobooks out into that market. With Findaway Voices, you can find a professional narrator, you can upload your own content, and you can choose to send to whichever or all of the more than 43 retail and library platforms that they have access to. You have a chance to set your own prices with Findaway Voices, and there's promotional opportunities using coupon codes through Spotify. Yeah, big, gigantic platform like Spotify. One of the things you can do with Findaway Voices is you can do promotions through Chirp, which is owned by BookBub. And right now, I'm in the midst of a Chirp deal. The email for that went out on January 26th. And I have to admit that while I've had a couple other Chirp deals that did pretty well, this one's not working out so well for me, and it may have something to do with the review. And I'm gonna read this review because it's a negative. It's a 1-star review, and I advise people never to read them. But it's probably not helping me. Now, this is my combined books, Fear and Longing in Los Angeles and Fright Night's Big City. I combined them into a bundle of Fears and Frights, which is a 2-book bundle. 17 hours of audio. Regularly sells for $24.99. On sale for a limited time of $1.99. And it's on sale until February 21st. So I have sold a good number of the books. I've put all of the books in my Canadian Werewolf series. I've reduced them all to try and, appeal to people who may want to just purchase everything. For I think $8 you can get the entire series of books, the 5 books in the series that are available in audio so far. But yeah, here's this. I've got 2 ratings of the bundle with a 3.0 average. And the only review posted a couple weeks ago was a 1-star review. And it reads, like the first books, but this latest had way too much sexual content. I stopped listening halfway through. I now have to find out how to remove this from my library in case kids listen to it. Also not sure why the author had to include so many political digs/comments. I feel the same, but why would you make comments like that throughout a novel about a werewolf? I will not read any other books from this author. Yeah, so there is some sexual content in the book, but it's pretty mild, to be quite honest. There's really only one sex scene in the book, and it's not all that graphic, although I wouldn't recommend anyone under the age of 18 reading it, though I know there are YA books that have more sex in them. The political digs and commentary. Yeah, see, I'm kind of anti-white supremacists. I'm kind of anti-neo-Nazi. And so I guess that's too political for some people because they're the bad guys in this series. They're the Proud Fighters for America, a white supremacist neo-Nazi hate group. And they may be inspired on some bad shit that's going down in the world, all over the world, actually, to be quite honest, but specifically in the United States. So this is me being very authentic and sharing a negative review that obviously is impacting my well-being. Another reason why you don't want to look at reviews like that. But yeah, so this is an interesting thing, and it's a little bit of a reflection within an ad read. Isn't this just multidimensional? Is the first 2 books, Canadian Werewolf in New York and Stowaway, the person obviously liked them and kept reading them. And then I lost them because I said Nazis are bad. And I had some adult sexual content as Michael finds a new lover in the series. So I guess the point of this, the reason I brought it up, is I highly suspect that the 1-star review is probably what's people are seeing it, and there's not enough reviews on it anyway to show on the main page, on the main thumbnail page. So I think you need to get like 6 or 7 reviews and ratings before you can get there. But obviously someone comes along, sees a 1-star review and is like, scary stuff. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out a way to get more people to come to this book and maybe start leaving more reviews. So I'm going to have to look into some other promotional things. I guess I got until February 21st. I may go to Written Word Media, see if I can drive people to Chirp. I'll have to figure that one out. Maybe I'll run some BookBub ads to drive people to Chirp in the hopes that the right people read the book and hopefully like it more than a 1-star review. Like even if I get a few sort of here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like. And I'll be honest, on Amazon there are people who loved it, and then there are people who really liked it but thought, the main character's a bit of a wuss, and he moans and whines too much because his girlfriend broke up with him. I get that. So there's things that people don't like. There are people who don't like the fact that I don't like Nazis as well on other sites. But that being said, I guess this is a really, really long reflection to say I've got that 1-star review of somebody who obviously really wasn't very fond of it. And I'm hoping, before this promotional period is over, to get a few more reviews on it, a little bit higher rating. Don't have to be 5-star reviews, of course, in the hopes that I can actually, benefit from this Chirp audio deal. Because right now, I think I've sold, let me see, I'm just going to click over, I may as well just click over to the estimated sales reports over on Findaway Voices, and let me see as it's loading, slowly loading, doing this live, well, not live because it's being recorded, and so I'm only seeing, so this is interesting, on the day of the promo, which was the 26th, that was when the email went out, it did okay. So on the 26th, when the email went out, okay, I'm scrolling up. I can't count. Let us see if I count. So this would be not just for a bundle of Fears and Frights, but for all of the books, related to it. So Canadian Werewolf in New York, etc. I'm just going to go. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 50. Okay, I can't do the count that quickly. Oh, you know what I could do? What I'll do is I'll just change it to the date range. I'll change it to the 26th. Change it to January 26th and end on January 26th. Okay, so I sold 69 books on that day, not of that one book. And that's really significantly lower than the number of books I sold of Canadian Werewolf in New York when it went on sale. And so if I actually change, you can actually change the, you can change the report to only show the one title. So if I just put in a bundle of Fears and Frights, I sold 45 of those, and then 69 books in total. So as of the entire month of January so far, for a bundle of Fears and Frights, $1.99, in which case I am making 70 cents every time that book sells. I have sold this month 86 copies, and I think I sold a few hundred copies of A Canadian Werewolf in New York the last time I did it. But in any case, again, this is a reflection. This is not a negative against Chirp. This is just a negative of that while this is a relatively okay promo, and it didn't cost me anything except I'm providing my book for a lot lower of a price, that this is just the reality sometimes of the promos. Sometimes they work really, really well, and sometimes they don't work well. But obviously, I'm wondering if that negative review has anything to do with it, or maybe I reached the maximum number of people on that platform that were interested in my stuff. Because when I did the promo on A Canadian Werewolf in New York, and then I did a price drop on, I think it was Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, I did also sell a lot of other books in this series. So potentially, this is the other thing that I don't know, is potentially a lot of the people who saw the email went, oh, I already have those books, so why would I want to buy it again? So that's the other thing that can happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad promo. I'm very grateful to the good folks at Chirp who selected it. And I'm going to continue to do price promos with Chirp, as well as with Apple and Barnes & Noble, and there's other platforms through Findaway Voices that you can do promotions. So even if a promotion does not work, it does not mean thou shalt give up. Maybe that's the lesson here. Okay, end of the ad read with a very, very long reflection. Because I've gone so long and meandered, I'm going to skip all of the other bits, the personal update and comments from recent episodes, and I'll get caught up on those in a couple weeks. In the meantime, I've babbled on enough. Why don't we get on to this conversation with Malcolm Coon? Hey, Malcolm, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
No, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
So let's give my listeners a little bit of a background about Malcolm Coon and his writing life.
Okay, well, my writing life. I guess the first thing I'd say is that I work full time in tech, doing consulting for clients. And I've known for a while that I've wanted to write. And this goes back, I think, all the way to probably 1997-ish. I had a falling out with a partner in a tech business that we had. And I was just like, this is for the birds. I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I'm just going to start writing books.
Okay.
And so I started writing a tech thriller novel, kind of in the,
Okay.
and that lasted for about a month. I didn't keep writing after that. Got busy with my next business.
Right.
But I've always had in the back of my mind, even back then, that I wanted to write. And I love fantasy. I grew up on, Tolkien and the Sword of Shannara and all of those books were the classics for me growing up. And I love that genre. So I started writing, I guess it was probably around 2011.
Okay.
I started getting serious about it. And that's when I started to discover your podcast and Joanna Penn's and the Sterling and Stone guys. And then thought, hey, this is something that I could do.
Right.
And I would get inspired and I would write for a couple of months and then work would happen and it would go on hold for a couple of months. There was never any consistency to that. Right. So at the end of last year, I was like, I really got to get consistent. So over that time, basically the past decade, I've got the first draft of a novel, of the first book in a trilogy. I've kind of got the outline for the second and third book. And then I started writing a series of short stories. And my plan was to write a short story a month over the course that would be kind of a prelude into the trilogy. So my goal this year is to get the trilogy finished, edited, and come out with that toward the end of the year. But in the meantime, put up a website and start putting out the short stories just as free lead magnets.
So I've got a few questions I want to dig into based on what you just shared.
Sure.
Did you find the transition from novel to short story? Did that make the process any easier? Like actually being able to get something written?
I'm not sure I've made it any easier because I think what I'm trying to do is write a series of 12 short stories that are kind of a series, almost episodic.
Oh, okay. So it's almost like a novel, but told in short stories.
Yeah, except it's more like a different adventures. So I'm starting out with, the kids when they were younger and the adventures they have on the island where they all grew up.
Okay.
Solving mysteries and stuff. And then the trilogy is when they're a little bit older. Okay. So it's YA fantasy.
Okay, and I was going to ask that because the first novel, when you said you and your partner, you kind of decided to change gears and start a different business, that was a tech thriller, potentially inspired by some of the stuff you do for the day job.
Yeah.
But I think there's another distinguishing factor here. A lot of people will work a job where they work for someone else, and then they can shut it off and they just turn everything off and write. Yeah. Because they punch a clock or whatever the case may. But I mean, an author is an entrepreneur, whether you work with a publisher or do it yourself. You're more entrepreneurial if you do it yourself. Right. But you're already an entrepreneur, right? You run your own consulting business.
I do. Yeah.
So that's got to be it's different, right?
There's no downtime. Like I don't stop. The clock never stops, right? I'm always thinking about, my clients and what we're doing or the code that I'm writing or whatever we happen to be working on, whatever the project is.
So I think that makes it a little trickier because you're already doing the entrepreneurial thing, but as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. And what I found is if I can get up just a little earlier in the morning and get my writing done first thing and have the discipline. And what I started doing, I've got a old Android tablet with a foldable keyboard.
Right.
And I basically will just sit down at that. And if I can write for even just 30 or 45 minutes every morning, that's my goal, is to do that before I open email or anything else. Because once the email gets opened, once the browser gets opened, it's like the next thing I know, it's 6 p.m. and I'm like, I haven't gotten any writing done. I barely got what I was supposed to get done for the day.
You and me both.
Yeah.
The minute I open the email, my writing's out the window for the day. So you said every morning you're getting up a little bit earlier, working on that. Now, Does that go in sort of like for a month and then you put it aside, or have you actually been able to get over that hurdle of I work on it for a bit and then it sits on the back burner?
Well, in the past that it's been for, I think my longest stretch was in 2020. And I went almost 3 or 4 months, almost every day writing, and then
Wow.
fell out of the habit. And so it's been sporadic since then. This month, I think I've missed 3 days this month.
Okay.
So
And
it's
we're in 23 days into the month, so that's
right,
20
right,
days you've written out of
right.
23. Hey,
Yeah.
you're not even taking weekends off.
Well, no, I'm not. And that's the plan, is if I do it a little bit every day, I think I'll be more disciplined and it won't be so hard for me to get back into it. If I miss a day, it's really easy to miss that second day, and even easier that third day.
It's like
And
that streak, right?
yeah, at the end of the year, I saw a post in one of the author forums I'm a member of, and this guy said that he was on, I can't remember, but it was like 200 or 250 days solid writing. Actually, it may have been 170 something, but even at that, I was like, maybe that I got kind of inspired by. I was like, if I just opened a spreadsheet and kept a count of my daily word count,
Right.
and then, eventually it's like the old Seinfeld telling a joke every day or writing a joke every day. You don't want to break the chain, and that becomes more important than whatever else is on the list.
And I guess it doesn't even matter if the words are words you're going to end up using. They're just basically bridges to get you to the next thing, right?
Yeah, and part of that's true. But when I looked back at my first draft of the first novel, that's kind of how I wrote. There was a lot of, back then I was reading a lot of books like Chris Fox and the writing faster. So I was trying dictation. I was trying to write faster. I'm not, despite the fact that I work in tech, I was never a touch typist.
Yeah.
Something my brother makes fun of me all the time for.
Yeah.
He's a really good typist, but I'm not. And so, but what I found out is that I think different when I'm trying to do dictation as opposed to when I'm trying to write it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've heard a lot of podcasts where people they edit what they wrote the day before the next morning, and they have a cleaner draft.
Right.
So I'm practicing that. I'm also practicing on Sunday when I have more time, trying to clean up what I wrote that week.
Okay.
So, because what I ended up with was basically, I'll be writing, and it's like, I don't want to stop to look something up or check, something. So I'll put in like 3 of the forward slashes, because I know I can search for that later, and then put a note.
Okay.
But then my whole draft was basically bad text and a bunch of things I had to go back and check. So then that gets overwhelming. It's like, how am I going to fix that?
Yeah, yeah.
So while I say I have a first draft, it basically has to be rewritten.
So it's a first draft with a lot of okay, now I have to research this. I got to go insert something that works here. Okay.
Right. Or I'll forget the name I called some character, and fantasy books, they've got a cast of 3,000. So, I lose track. Did I call that person Nelson last time, or were they called something else?
Right.
Right.
So for the stories then, because how far along are you with that goal or that plan?
Basic plotting, I'm pretty far along. Like I've got a world created, and I mean, you'll probably laugh at this, but I'm basically using as a world my brother and I created when we were in middle school playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh my God, awesome. Well, it's something you're familiar with then, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of a world that we've created, and I've added a bunch of history onto it, and the characters and stuff like that. The characters I'm writing about are not our characters, but they're, the world we basically spent a lot of time already creating. So
Love that. Do you guys still do that at all, or is that just sort of?
We don't. We stopped when. Well, I say we don't. We stopped when we went to college, and we didn't play for 20 years.
Right.
And then his kids, my nephews, got interested in it, and we started playing with them for a couple of years, and then eventually they decided they'd rather play with their friends than their dad and their uncle, I think. So
Now, did you play it the way that we played when I was a teenager with the dice and you're there in person, or is it like using R20 and stuff online?
No. It was always in person for us.
Yeah. Okay. Because it'd be great to have the kids. I was trying to explain to my son what that was like, because he's seen Stranger Things, and I go, well, that was us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was it. We were old school. We started with the blue box set, the basic edition D&D, and we played for a lot of years, had a lot of our high school friends playing with us. So it was
Okay.
good. But when we went to college, I mean, the other things were more interesting. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And
yeah,
also the workload was a little bit different as well. You
that's true.
usually would separate too, and you
Right.
weren't all in the same town anymore.
Yeah.
So interesting. I'd like to, when I look back at things like Dungeons and Dragons and role playing, there's a lot of creativity, a lot of world building, a lot of imagination. You're writing in a different way.
Right.
You started off in epic fantasy. Somewhere along the line, you got interested in writing, or you always were interested in writing, but then that first thing you sat down to write was a techno thriller, which is a different genre.
Right.
And then you came right back 360, right?
Well, and I did do in the past, I guess 7 years, I did do a small book called The Greatest Writer in the World, which is kind of a parable. So I
Okay.
started taking all the things I was learning from your podcast and from Joanna Penn and all these podcasts I was listening to.
Okay.
And I wrote a story about a guy who just wanted to start writing in kind of the old style Greatest Salesman of the World
Yeah.
type parable. And then I put a bunch of resources for writers. And I also did a parable for the tech industry to help small business owners
Right.
like secure their business. And I posted those on Amazon. I did my own cover.
Oh, so
Didn't
you
really
actually
get them.
published, you've
Oh yeah.
published a few books then
Well,
but in a completely different genre.
yeah, I published those two. They're kind of nonfiction books.
Yeah.
I put them up on Amazon. I went through the whole process, and after about, I guess, a year or so, I mean, I think maybe I sold one copy, right?
Right.
I never advertised, I never promoted, and I realized at some point just how bad they were because I never edited them. I didn't do professional covers. I didn't do all
Right.
the stuff that is taught to us. So I took them off Amazon, so they're not up there anymore. But the tech thriller too that's another one that at some point I'd like to go back to.
Right.
That's one that my brother and I were probably going to write together, and
Okay.
we were doing some stuff online that we wanted to write about. And he's also interested in writing, and he's writing some urban fiction stuff.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
so both of us are interested in writing, and he works in tech too, by the way. So he lives in Colorado. So, but we're both interested in writing, and I think we both love what we do in tech. I'm not sure that I'm never going to be, of course, we're entrepreneurs. We started our
Right.
first business. We started it together, and we're entrepreneurs at heart. I do want to ultimately make a living from writing, but I don't think it's going to stop me from, running other businesses either. So,
Well, especially if it's something you're passionate about, you're good at, you really enjoy, why would you want to get rid of it?
right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. So what do you said that 2023 was going to be the year, right? So
Yep.
what have you done? So I'll give you an example. Like I purchased this planner for
I remember the
authors.
planner. Yeah.
I have not yet put a single scratch inside of it.
Right.
But my intent, so we're 23 days into the year and I haven't yet done anything in it. But my intent was, all right, I'm going to start using something like this.
Yeah.
I haven't yet. Obviously I'm not doing so well with it, but what have you decided? Have you created any sort of plan or strategy to get there by the end of the year? Or?
Yeah. So back a couple of years ago, I created basically a little spreadsheet tracker. It's an Excel tracker where I put my word counts, and I created it to track like my word count
Right.
and my speed, like words per minute.
Okay.
Oh, and that's what I was going to say earlier was I'm less concerned now with words per minute and doing some combination of, okay, I need to be productive. I need to create I need to create words per minute, but that's not the only thing, right? I want to create quality. And while what I noticed is when I'm writing now in the morning, I'm not going back and correcting all the little grammar stuff, right? But I am trying to make it where it's not such a chore to clean up.
Okay.
Right. So, but I need to find my old spreadsheet and make changes because I want to start tracking my daily word count and then have the deadlines. I actually created like a production schedule on another tab in the spreadsheet so that, by the end of the month, I know I've got to have the cover. I'm going to publish the first free short story and stay on track with the short stories while at the same time getting words in on the novels.
Okay. Are you applying some of your know-how and knowledge with like project management for clients and stuff like that into the writing world?
You would think that I would be better at project management when I'm managing, but when I'm managing myself, I'm not quite so good as when I'm managing other developers.
Yeah. Well, there's
I
that pressure, right?
yeah,
Someone's depending upon you, but this
right,
this author thing is, well, until I put it out there, I'm the only one
right.
who's
Well,
knows about this.
and I think that's what I've skated on like the past decade, right? It's like,
Right.
well, I mean, my friends know that I'm writing and they'll ask me and like, yeah, I'm still writing. I just haven't gotten it right yet. But I haven't really like put out a deadline and I haven't put out stuff. And I'm
Right.
like, it's easy to skate by. And I realized at some point last year, especially when I saw that guy's post about the number of solid days he'd written in a row, I'm like, it's crazy that I can't do that with my
Yeah.
schedule and my desire to do it. I just need to do it.
I like that idea. Now, before we started recording, we were sort of talking about the early days because you said it was like 2011-ish that you were
Right.
getting
Yeah.
serious about writing, and we were talking about Joanna Penn and the boys from the self-publishing podcast, and
Hmm.
and I think I reminded you of Johnny B. Truant, who Johnny, Sean, and Dave had a podcast called Self-Publishing Podcast. It was one of
Yep.
the first. I mean, Joanna Penn was, a pioneer, but
Hmm.
they were one of the early podcasts about self-publishing because there weren't a lot
Hmm.
out there. Lindsay Broker had one of her early iterations.
Right.
Merle Lafferty had I Should Be Writing and stuff like that, like early. I mean, I go back to 2006, 2007, of
Yeah. That
course.
was way
Uh,
before. Yeah.
and Johnny, who is a very prolific writer now, writes a lot, had a book he had spent 10 years writing, and
Hmm.
he was like marveling at what Sean and Dave were doing. And he had The Be All E Pimps, which was a memoir of working at a bagel shop,
Hmm.
and based on a real life story. And he just couldn't understand how these guys could write so much. And we thought, oh yeah, there was that breakthrough moment, I think. And of course, Fat Vampire being turned into Reginald the Vampire is
Hmm.
but Fat Vampire, I think, was a groundbreaking moment for him where they made a joke about what if Dave turned into a vampire, and Dave's like, well, I'm fat, I wouldn't be able to chase my prey, blah blah blah, and
Right.
they bam,
Right.
and then Johnny just ran with it, wrote 5 books.
Right. Well, and they did Unicorn Western.
Yeah, Unicorn
Yeah.
Western, and then they just
Right.
kind of went all over the place.
Right.
Do you ever wonder if there's some sort of potential breakthrough moment? Was the breakthrough moment, could it have been that author that had the streak, the Seinfeld streak?
Right.
Is that potentially the breakthrough moment where you're going to go, that's what did it for me?
Yeah, I think so, because I think what that made me realize is that, and there was something about his post, and I don't have it in front of me. I don't remember it. I don't even remember who posted it, but he said something like, some days it was 25 words. Some
Right.
days it was 2000 words, right? But it was the consistency. And I'm like, it doesn't really matter what's going on in my life. I can write 25 words. I could write 25 words on my phone standing in line at the grocery store if I would keep it focused and keep it in the forefront of my mind. That's my goal, that no matter what happens, by the time my head hits the pillow, I've got at least 25 words,
Wow.
right?
I love that. Well, I love the fact that it's not, yeah, I have to get 500 words, I have to get 1,000, I have to get 2,000, I have to write 10,000. That you're just keeping that consistency, and that may be enough to fuel you to keep going, right?
Yeah, for me, I think it is. It's, because for me, I think there really is no excuse not to write something every day, right?
Right.
And for a lot of us, I mean, we all get busy with life, and I understand that, but and I think what's more important is that we all figure out what works for us. Like, there's nothing magic about writing every day.
Yeah.
I kind of saw that is something that would work for me.
Right.
But I think for people with families or people with demanding jobs, or, whatever your circumstances are in life, if you wrote 5 days a week or every other day or whatever really works for you, I think the important thing that we owe it to ourselves is this is something that we've said we want to do, and we owe it to ourselves to actually do it and create a way for us to do it, right?
Right.
That it works for us in our lives. So I guess that's what resonated with me with that message was, okay, well, 25 words, I can write 25 words a day.
Yeah.
Now I'm
Yeah.
counting on the fact that I'm going to write more words per day because, 25 words a day, it's going to be another 10 years. Right. So there is a productivity in reality, right, that we have to
Right.
produce. But I think, part of it is we hear a lot of stories about the people who are successful. And a lot of times we hear those stories and they become legend, like, oh, well, they write 10,000 words a day,
Right.
or they write these great books. And it's like, well, I'm not sure I could write that well.
Yeah. I think the catch too is, and I think this has to do with the retail customer psychology. So this is like from the ebook world.
Mm-hmm.
When a customer downloads a book for free, there's no barrier. They just throw it on their Kindle, their Kobo, their Nook, whatever,
Right.
and they forget about it.
Yeah, my
The
Kindle is
minute,
littered with free books, by the way.
yeah, and you forget about them. You just,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it's not that you didn't want to read it. It's just, I just grabbed it because it was quick. I wanted to get it while it was free.
Right.
As opposed to when you even have to crack open the wallet to spend $1, the
Mm-hmm.
psychology is suddenly different. So it's
Right.
almost like when you open the wallet of your writing world and you get
Right.
the 25 words out, you're like, wow, let's just do another 25. Let's
Right.
just have one more potato chip.
Right. Yeah.
So there might
Yeah.
be something there.
Yeah. And in truth, if I'm just, as long as I don't open my email or my browser or sit at my computer, if I just grab my tablet with my little keyboard and my cup of coffee, I'll write a couple of hundred words before I even finish the first cup of coffee.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. So, I've really, but it's getting in the habit of doing that every single day. Like that becomes part of my morning ritual, just like meditating, just like everything else that we do.
So what's the plan then for, you talked about the short stories, you talked about
Mm-hmm.
that free, what do you have sort of, even if it's a rough plan for the next 12 months in the Malcolm's writer journey?
So the overall rough plan is to rewrite the first novel and get it edited and get the cover done by August,
Okay.
and have the beats for the second and third one done so that those can be released probably within 2 to 3 months after.
Okay.
So, and then have the short stories, really, I'm using the short stories. And this is something that came from Thomas Umstadt's course, right? But it's get the muscle of producing something every month.
Okay.
Right. So a short story every month over the course of a year.
Right.
And so, my first short story is due next week. By the way, we're coming up on the end of the month.
Oh yeah. How's that coming along so far?
It's about half written.
Okay.
I may not have the cover and have it published by the end of the month, but the first one, I'll get that one done. I'm going to hold my feet to the fire for the one in February. So I think that it will get easier as I develop the habit.
I like that. Would it also potentially help you, speaking of holding your feet to the fire, would it help you to threaten you with asking you to come back and give occasional updates on how the plan is moving along?
Yes, I think that would.
Okay.
If I knew I was going to have to talk to Mark.
Well, I think
and explain how I did nothing for 3 months. That would be very
well.
different.
No, I think I'm curious to see if we plan on coming back together, let's say in March or something like that, and say,
Sure.
okay, how's the plan coming along? How did the story go? What's going on? Even if the story's not published, if you got it written and it's in some sort of state of getting closer to production, that's those 25 words, isn't it?
Right.
Awesome.
Yep.
And then I would love to, if you're willing, do at least one follow up, and then come back towards the end of the year and say, all right, how did it go?
Sure. I'm happy to.
Awesome. Well, Malcolm, thank you for being so open and willing to talk about this process and the long-term goals and strategies and the minor triumphs along the way. Is there a place where people can find out more about you online?
Well, not really. I don't even have an author website yet. So.
Okay. I was going to say, so there's no link to share so people can look up. So people will have to stay tuned if they want to find out more about how Malcolm's journey is going.
Got to stay subscribed at least through March to get the next episode.
Awesome. Well, Malcolm, thanks so much for hanging out with me and sharing your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
I wanted to reflect on a few things from the conversation with Malcolm. The first is, and this is really, really important, is sometimes it takes a while, and it can take a number of false starts before you get to where you need to be or where you want to be. And Malcolm was very open and honest about, starting in 2011 and putting a project away and having false starts and then work got busy, etc. But that happens to all of us. I bet you there's plenty of listeners to this podcast who resonate with that and say, yeah, same here. I've mentioned this before in earlier episodes of the podcast, but I'll mention it again. The very first book I wrote, first draft, took me a year to write. I wrote it on the GO train commuting into Toronto. Was working on it for a little while, sent it off to a few publishers, and it's been on the back burner since 1990s, maybe the early 2000s. This novel was called Morning Sun. It's a little bit more literary. It has a bit of a mystery to it, but it's not a conventional mystery. Probably people who read it wouldn't think of it as a mystery, even though there is a mystery to uncover in the story. But and it's a close one to my heart, and that's still in a drawer. And I do plan on pulling it out and giving it a good once over now that I'm 20 years later, now that I know a little bit more about writing. So I mean that took a while, and then I did send it to a few publishers, and nothing happened with it. I'll probably pull it out again. But A Canadian Werewolf in New York, I started writing on for NaNoWriMo probably back in 2006. I talked about my plans to write this book on an old podcast by Paula B called The Writing Show Podcast. And I can include a link to these episodes. She wanted to do sort of a reality. That's back when reality shows were, all over the place and popular. And this was a reality show of getting published with Mark Leslie, and she wanted to focus on a horror author. And so I think there's 13 episodes, and she follows me along. She's like, how you doing? Well, I'm going to write this for NaNoWriMo, and look at me go. I'm at 10,000 words, 20,000 words, etc. And then I think I got to 30,000 words, and I gave up, or I stopped. And again, she kept coming back, and despite me having the pressure of Paula and listeners who were commenting and paying attention, I've stayed in contact with a few of those folks. But despite all that, I never finished it. We got to the end, 13 episodes. Now, Paula ended up retiring the podcast, probably 2009, 2010-ish. And all I had come up with were excuses as to why I couldn't get the book done or why I wasn't getting the book done. I didn't actually pick that book up again to write until many years later. And I didn't finish the first draft and get that draft to an editor until 2014-ish, 2013, 2014. Did some rewrites, etc. And then I published it in 2016. 10 years after I started working on it, thinking, okay, I'll get the first draft done in November. Now, I could have given up. And one might think I practically gave up, but I came back to it, and it was important to me. And that Canadian Werewolf universe, and I didn't know it was going to be universe because it was just supposed to be one book at that point in time. It was just a short story initially. Has been really important and valuable to me, and I've learned so much about writing that series. But it took me 10 years to get that one book done. There are probably, if you talk to writers, there are probably numerous writers who have had that experience. So if you have had false starts, have not finished some projects, etc., don't beat yourself up. Maybe it's not the right time. I think when I actually finished the novel A Canadian Werewolf in New York, I think when I finished that first draft, 8 years later or whatever it was, I was ready then. And I wasn't ready to write that book then. So if that happens to you, yes, persistence is important, but also, pushing on the pull door repeatedly may not be the right thing for you either. Again, the last thing I want is to cause you more anxiety. But beating yourself up is not going to help. The second thing I wanted to reflect on was the importance that Malcolm talked about setting extremely reasonable goals, extremely ridiculously reasonable goals, like 25 words a day. Think about that. 25 words a day. You can write them while you're in line at the grocery store on your phone. So that's a really, it seems silly, but again, it's like once you open it, once you start, once you get going, maybe another 25. And because again, it will take 10 years to write a novel with 25 words a day, but it's a reasonable goal. Of course you can hit it. And if you're trying to keep track of yourself and think, okay, well, Monday I didn't get any words done, so Tuesday I'm going to have to write 50. No, you're not going to wait 10 years and then write them all in one day. So, but that's a kind of, it's an option that works for Malcolm, and he likes it and it resonates with him. And that kind of blends into the third reflection. Because if you're hearing that 25 words a day and you're like, yeah, no, that doesn't do anything for me. Okay, that's cool. Because not all advice or ideas that you hear are for everyone. What works for Malcolm might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me, etc., etc. That's okay. But it does require, in order for you to understand what works and what doesn't work, it requires a little bit of experimentation so you can figure out the things that fit well in your own world, that fit well with what you want to do, that fit well with what inspires and resonates with you and allows you the ability to get those things done. So yeah, I spit out a lot of advice, and I talk to amazing people on this podcast who have great ideas and things that worked for them. But please don't beat yourself up if you tried that and it didn't work for you. Because it's just not for you. Just like writing that book at that time was probably not in the cards. You kind of roll with it. As Del Griffith from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles would say, is you go with the flow, like a twig on the shoulders of a mighty stream. And I think it's important for us to do that, to just go with it and know and have the confidence, hopefully, that we'll figure something out, that we'll figure something else out. Good friend of mine, his girlfriend would often say, let's not worry about it, because magic. And that was her term, because magic will happen. Something will happen and it'll be okay. I'm just ever the optimist, of course. And I love that perspective. I love the fact that, yeah, we'll get there. We'll figure that out. We'll get to that. And the timing isn't right now. Maybe it will be later. But anyways, that is the end of this rambling reflection. That is the end of this episode. Thank you so much, dear listener, for listening to this podcast. I love to hear from you. If you have any reflections on things that Malcolm said that you would want to reflect on, you can always leave the comments over at starkreflections.ca. At me on Twitter, I'm at Mark Leslie. And I'm actually tempted to create a form for listeners who want to record their reflections in audio, on your phone or whatever, and then just upload them to a form, because I think it would be interesting to hear some of those reflections in your voices rather than always hearing my interpretation of your voice, because I just come across with the same old, Ontario, Canada accent that for everyone. But in any case, thanks again for listening. If you want to support the podcast, you can join the awesome patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/starkreflections. And a huge thank you to those who do support this podcast over on Patreon. You can support the podcast by leaving a review on the podcatcher of your choice. And, reviews, as we know, as authors, are always so very, very important. You can also share an episode of this podcast or the podcast in general with a friend that you think would find value in these Dark Reflections. So, until next week and next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com. Oh, hey, just a little bit of an update. Now, Malcolm and I recorded this interview on January 23rd, and I'm recording this on January 31st, so 8 days later, basically a week and a day. Yes, Mark, we know that's what 8 days are. So I didn't know I had to do that. I had to figure that out aloud here as I'm going off script, of course, as I always do. But I wanted to give you an update. I reached out to Malcolm to let him know, hey, episode's going to be going live. How did you do on that thing I promised I would hold your feet to the fire for, which is he wanted to get that first story written, not edited or whatever, but that first story completed by the end of January, and he did. He got the first draft done the end of January. He's on track. As I mentioned, I'll be checking in with him again, and we'll come back and we'll see how he's doing, and maybe we'll hold him accountable. Now, hopefully he doesn't pull a Mark Leslie and do what I did to Paula B on her writing show podcast and come up with all kinds of excuses as to why he can't get these stories done. But Malcolm so far is on track. Mark Leslie was not on track. Malcolm on track. Yay, good for you, Malcolm. Very excited, very awesome. Thanks for being a guest on the show, and thanks for giving the update and being willing to be so, open for sharing your authentic writer journey.